Hey, hello. I'm going to try here to make a quiz for this week, going back and forth, and we'll just see how it works. If it doesn't work this way, I'll figure something else out. But the quiz is already up. It'll open up for you on Thursday morning at around 1 in the morning after Wednesday night, and it will run this time through Sunday at midnight in case you fall behind on the first week. And the quizzes really, they sort of, if you look at the introductory video, it's a half-an-hour video, and I'm not positive how long this will be, and they're 25 multiple choice questions. At any rate, if you listen to that other video and then listen here and have read the material, you should have no trouble because it's open book. What will happen is you'll get in there and it'll give you one question at a time, and they're out of the 25 there, they're offered in random sequence. You can't backtrack, but you can finish. As long as you finish in one sitting, you're all right. Now, if you wait too long to answer, you don't have anything going on. Of course, things can go wrong. If you get shut out, let me know, and I'll reset the entire quiz for you. But, basically, in the first, as I said in the other video, this first of the trilogy really lays the foundation for the dynamics that inform all three books. And it starts out in the very beginning with Katniss putting on her father's jacket, and we find that Katniss and her family live in the poor section, if you will, of town of the District 12, a small place, and it's called the Seam. The Seam, of course, is another name for something that has to do with coal seams in Appalachia, where the novel takes place. So she's the coal miner's daughter, as it were. Peeta's father, unlike Gale's father and Katniss's father, who got killed in explosion at the mine, very dangerous work. Peeta's father is the baker, a kind-hearted baker who comes to visit Katniss before she leaves to go to the Hunger Games. And we learn that Peeta's father really loved Katniss's mother, and that Katniss's mother left the apothecary family of the middle class to marry the father. And Peeta's dad always says it's because Katniss's mother loved Katniss's father because of his singing. Katniss itself, you'll come to find, is named after an edible root that she is in the pond where her father takes her, and where she learns to shoot the arrow. And these are edible plants. And his father always tells Katniss that as long as you can find yourself, you'll just be fine. And that has a double meaning, of course. It means that if she has her eyes open and sees the arrow, I think they're arrow-shaped plants, the Katniss plant, and she knows that if she digs down into the mud and to find the bulb, that the bulbs are edible. But it also means that that Katniss, at 16 now in the novel, is in a process of finding herself, as discovering who she is. And you'll find through, well, most of the three books anyway, that she's conflicted in many different ways and uncertain. And when the time of that the reaping takes place, Katniss is 16 years old, and she won't let doesn't want her sister to take too many chances. And when she gets one of the major symbols of her finding herself from the mayor's daughter, whose name is Madge, and she gives the pin, which means nothing at the time, really, to Katniss other than the fact that these birds imitated her father wonderfully. But this becomes a symbol not only of Katniss' search for identity, but also for the revolution to come, in which she will be obviously involved. Now, when the novel opens, we're at the time of the 74th reading of um, the reaping, excuse me, not reading. And as I wrote in the, I love the idea of a reaping, but the 74th reaping, and Gale, we learn, and this is a thing to remember, that Gale has his name in the pool 42 times, which is one of the shocks, is that Peeta does not have his name in very often because he doesn't have to take a tesserae or tessera. And the tessera is just to get food. You can, opt out, opt to take for your family, your sisters or your brothers, 1 year's supply, not very much. Really, it keeps you on starvation diet, but that's everybody in the district. Basically, either you're not living in the seam, you're starving. If you're living in the seam, you're starving. But Gale has his name in there so many times because each time you get a tessera, your name is multiplied. The number of times you're in the reaping is multiplied. So Katniss obviously has quite a few, but Gale has 42. Now, the tessera is economically speaking, ensures inequality, economic and otherwise. It ensures that the poor people, the more dispendable, if you want to think about it, but dispendable society, the ones, in modern times people would say are living off the government. All these arguments I pointed out before, have to do in many ways the kinds of things that are going on in our society, or we can at least make easy correspondences. So that the tessera ensures that the less wealthy, the less advantaged, have more of a chance of getting chosen. So Madge has little chance of getting chosen. And this is what Gale gives her a hard time about. And there are other things that are going on connecting with the reaping. You have the dark days, and the dark days refer to the revolt of the 13 districts against capital, the 13 districts of Panem against capital. And so you want to remember that those were the dark days, and then comes the Treaty of Treason, after District 13 has supposedly been completely destroyed. That's not a spoiler we're going to be in. There's a lot of talk about District 13 in our show. Now, the Hunger Game does use District 13. It shows a video of District 13 that everybody, not just once, but it's kind of there a lot, is a constant reminder of the destruction from the district. You'll learn later, or one of them, there's a mention that District 13 produces graphite, and graphite used for the creation of nuclear weapons. So at any rate, this video is shown all the time, and that's why most of the people just assume that that was the price that District paid for the destruction the war caused. And you have all these time peacekeepers, and the peacekeepers are basically, they're supposed to be like the United Nations peace enforcers. In District 12, you'll find that the rules are kind of lax compared to what goes on in the other places that you'll discover. But one of the leader, and I can't remember his name right now because I didn't bring out my sheet of paper. The leader is the biggest drinker next to Havermitch. I can't remember I'm having trouble with names right at the second. And then Darius takes produce. He's in the hub all the time. The hub is the black market, and that's where Gale and Katniss, when they go on the other side of the forbidden electrical fence, to the forbidden zone, if you will, um, the peacekeepers are amongst the ones who take the spoils. They reap the spoils. And so it's kind of lax. This, like I say, will change. That's part of what goes on here, lays the foundation. Now, interesting that Katniss, the last thing she sees herself as is as beautiful, and that's one of the things she finds out about herself when she puts on these costumes uh, for the chariot show. That's another feature of the Roman Empire and the gladiators. We'll see Charlton Heston in these roles. Um, when Katniss, of course, decides to take on the role after Prim volunteering to replace Little Prim, whom she wants to protect more than just about anything. Um, the reaction of the crowd is of interest. I mean, the last thing that Katniss wants or sees herself as a revolutionary at this point, although she does have that pin on, um, when she gets chosen, and pay attention, and she becomes the tribute for the district, the crowd reacts in silence. And, with the three fingers of the salute. And if she says that salute means admiration and farewell to someone loved, so it's a great thing that the district does for her. But it also is a symbol of a revolt. That is the kinds of symbols that Snow cannot abide, because that goes against the spirit of what the Hunger Games are supposed to be, uh, which is to pay for uh, tribute to uh, capital as the protector of Panem. It's also to provide entertainment, but it's also punishment. So the last thing he wants people to do, he wants everybody to enjoy and bake bets and, find sponsors to send things that people need in the arena, but he doesn't want any dissension. And that silent gesture is one of protest. And such be, we'll find that Katniss is a sort of she doesn't want to be a hero. She doesn't want to survive, and that's part of the conflict that goes on. Now, the games themselves are interesting for many reasons, but they're also where they try out military things. This isn't developed yet, but I want you to be thinking about it with the mutations and whatnot. And one of the jabber, the mocking jays themselves, are a surprise species. It's one of the unattended consequences of weapons. During the war or the revolt, Capital produced jabberjays. They were male, genetically mutated birds of a finite. It's supposed to be a finite lifespan, if you will. Um, they mimic voices or repeat. And then, of course, the revolution, when the people find out what the jays are doing, they manipulate it. They, throw it back. This is one of the unintended consequences. The other one is that they mated with not male mockingbirds, female mockingbirds. The male jabberjays mated with female mockingbirds to create mockingjays. Residue and reminder, in a way, of the revolt and of, there was a surprise there. Let's put it that way. Now, once they get on the train and they eat all that wonderful food, and the obvious of the growing tensions and the relationship between Peeta uh, and Katniss. I remember that Katniss really doesn't know Peeta well, but she does remember that after the dad died, when she was starving, Peeta was the boy who gave her bread. And obviously there's a connection there that Peeta is another kind of bread, and Panem itself means sustenance, bread, uh, manna that they rain down on the 12 districts because of their largesse. Yeah, right. So when she gets on the train, they go there. The first they have to go before going to the training center. I love it. Um, Katniss must first experience the remake center, where of course they rip off the hair on her legs. Her body just becomes something that she doesn't even think about being naked in front of all these people after a while, because that's the kind of stuff that they do, and they do her hair, her nails, her skin, everything. Of course, Peeta, being the male, doesn't have to have as much done, but they make her look stunning to die, if you will, stunning to enhance the reality show quality of the games, so that you have the training center where they learn different skills, and then you have the remake center that comes first. I just like that idea of these people. They represent entertainment, but they also are reminders of the agonies that went into the games, that went into the revolt or the consequences of. But they're really kind of a commodities. They're kind of an entertainment for capital in particular. But when you read, you find that the people, for instance, of uh, the district, all the districts apparently, but we know from 12 is that people make bets. As disgusting as it sounds, like if you can't change it anyway, why not have some entertainment? But they're forced to watch certain parts of it, especially the recap. Now you meet other kinds of suggestions of the terror of what goes on in capital. One of them is the Avox, whom the redheaded girl, whom Katniss recognizes as a man and a young girl who were in the woods, and they were trying to escape to away from capital or wherever they were going, and she doesn't do anything to help. There's really nothing she can do, but a hovercraft is there and uh, whacks the boy with a spear, killing him, and raises him up. And the last thing she sees is this girl going up, and then that girl is there. There's an AVOX, AVOX, then is a person rendered speechless for a crime against the laws of capital, kind of a treason kind of thing. And it's always a reminder again of what can happen to you. They're rendered speechless. And they like little robots. It is also here that Peeta says, "Oh, that's that Cartwright girl. That's who it is," because of course Katniss would be admitting what Snow already knows, is that she hunts, even that uh, Gale grabbed her and kissed her. So there's eyes everywhere. It's like Big Brother is watching. Now, the other thing again is that you got to remember in this YA novel that Katniss is a teenager, and one of the reasons, as I suggested um previously, is that we get into it because we can appreciate the plight that she goes through as a 16-year-old. But when she becomes a tribute in the 74th Hunger Game, she's only 16. She's developing, if you will. And that accounts for, without suggesting it directly, implication of all the different um, turmoil, if you will, that goes through an adolescent's life. And then we get into this other world that also reflects a reality about our worlds. Now, as you learn in the book, as part of the game and the whole idea for honors, the wealthier districts, and that's including 1, 2, and 4, who make things basically of importance, like electronics and things like that, things of greater value than coal or clothing, or, if you will, clothing might not be the agriculture, the area that Rue is from. Anyway, they actually train. It's supposed to be illegal, but no one, because they want all the glory. The people from 1, 2, and 4, and then they always volunteer unless one of the careers gets chosen. Um, that's what they're called, by the way, by the people in District 11 anyway. They're called the careers. Uh, and they make a career out of becoming the tribute, um, and they often are the ones who win. It's always, I mean, that somebody else may have a strategy, or the games aren't exactly fair, as you find out, with the fire and things like that. That the game makers, especially the one who runs the games, can suggest, well, let's have a flood here so that everybody will start herding towards the cornucopia and we can bring this to an end. Uh, the game makers, though, are these people the um, who watch the training, and watch the training, and they oversee the what do you call it, the when the uh, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know what I mean. When everybody displays their special talent, they're all in that place. Remember that Katniss is so pissed off that she goes last, and she's hitting the targets right and left and doing all this thing, and because she missed the first time, um, they're not watching, so she shoots an arrow through the mouth of the pig that they're all dining on, and they end up giving her an 11. Now, those people, it's interesting, is what they wear. Um, and what they wear are deep purple robes. Now, this is the Roman connection. Those deep purple robes, purple always been a kind of a color of royalty and whatnot, but they also were the color that Roman senators wore. And she's borrowing from these motifs, not to suggest that the whole book is a replay of Roman history. It gives it a kind of a depth, but don't think that the answers to everything are to be found in Rome. The answer to a lot of things are going to be found in our own society, which is what the things I've been trying to talk about here a little bit, as we've been going through. Now, at the training, um, Peeta excels. We've learned to find in hand-to-hand combat. He's very good, and also camouflage. He's excellent because, by the way, the reason for the hand-to-hand has to do with his coordination and the fact that he's strong from, carrying all this stuff around as part of his upbringing. But he's good at camouflage also because he does a lot of design on frostings and things like that. So again, um, Katniss will win the award for edible plants because that's based upon her own experience. And then, so this is what I mean, is that what happens to them in their life has a direct relationship to what they do in the games and their reactions to things. So remember that. That's part of the reality that's created. Now, uh, Katniss will eventually become an ally of Little Rue. Um, and Little Rue reminds her all the time of Prim, her sister. They're about the same. They said they wouldn't weigh over 70 even with wet clothes on. But the Prim is named after the primrose flower. It's just a delicate flower. And Rue reminds Katniss of another flower, more further cementing this uh, desire to protect Rue as much as possible, and she can't because Crew gets killed, and the idea of her sister, the delicate Prim, whom she volunteers to die for, to protect her. So that's a small yellow flower that grows in the meadow area of District 12, and that we have these cemented relationships. And the other thing of defiance, she reminds her of a flower, and then when Prim is killed by the boy from District 1, whom Katniss dispatches with one of her arrows. Remember that she doesn't just let the um, hovercraft come and pick up the body. She surrounds the body with flowers and gives that pledge and turns because she assumes that the people in District 11 will be watching, and this is another seen as another act of revolt and defiance against Paranoid Snow, where she may have been doing it as a tribute only to the girl. This will continue. Uh, Now, of course, to get necessarily gifts from sponsors, Haymitch just begs her, play the game, play the game. It's all appearances, so she has to go through the motions of being in love with Peeta, whom she doesn't think she loves or doesn't know that she loves, whereas Peeta, it tells the truth. Peeta is able to talk. Uh, Katniss, it turns out, is kind of more about action. She just doesn't feel confident to be able to talk, especially with deception, but the way that Peeta can. But when Peeta talks about, it's too bad that the girl I've been in love with, who doesn't know I love me, has come with me, he's not lying. But Katniss has to play the game so that she can get uh, what she wants, and Haymitch can get stuff from the sponsors, such as the ointment for her burns, but also the what she gets to help Peeta. Now, of course, she has to go and fight to get the the injections that right she needs for Peeta, but to save Peeta, that's can be supplied, but she has to fight for that. Remember, and the other is that she gets the broth that'll help the fever and whatnot that Peeta has. So there's again, it's a game show presentations. Also, by the way, remember that Thresh is there, the male from uh, District 11, who could have killed Katniss, who was hit in the forehead with a knife and was ready to be killed. Thresh comes and kills that girl and then lets Katniss go because he had shown favor to Rue. So these things all come back, all the relationships, but Thresh, of course, is killed by Cato. Now, there are other remarkable characters. There's Caesar Flickerman, played by Stanley Tucci to excellence in the movie. He hosts the interviews before the tributes enter the arena, and he's done this. He's hosted the interviews for 40 years. And he has the conversations at the end, first with uh, the girl on fire in her dress that she can spin around in, and the idea is to make them, and both she and Peeta play at the game of holding hands, to make everybody in the audience, especially for the games, for the Capitol, fall in love with them. And that's very important. But remember, it's almost like a reality show. It's just a game, and so you have to pay attention when you're reading to realize the kinds of differences between the appearances and the reality. Now, Katniss, in the beginning, she defies, in other words, Haymitch says, don't stop at the cornucopia. That's where the slaughter begins. Get into a safe place and find water. But she does stop and pick up a backpack and almost gets killed, but she gets a knife because someone throws it at her. But she gets the bow and arrow after she gets treed, remember? And she gets them for Glimmer, has them. Of course, she doesn't know how to use them, which is one of the reasons uh, Pete is able to say, let's just leave her up there for the day. She's not going anywhere. We'll get her tomorrow. It's because Glimmer can't shoot a bow and an arrow. But Glimmer gets stung all over by the Cracker Jackers, have really horrendous venom, sends, Katniss into hallucinations. One of the realities in the hallucination is, of course, that Peeta fights off Cato uh, to save her, and he gets, we call it hamstrung. He's Cato makes him suffer. He's going to make him suffer and die because he'll die eventually from his wound. Except Katniss finds him camouflaged in the mud. Um, Now, when it's the relationship with Rue is, of course, very special. Rue's just a little girl and helps, and helps her with the distinguishing of berries she can eat and things like this. When she's dying from the spear through her gut, um, Rue begs and asks Katniss to sing her a song, and she sings the song her father sung, and that which she hasn't really sung since her father's death, but she has a pretty good voice, and she sings the song, and it's also her singing that catches Peeta's eye at school, as she comes to find out, and so that's when she puts all the flowers around the grave, and they don't show that on uh, the loop, at the feed that's coming from the arena, because of course that's an act of defiance. Now, Peeta eventually, because of the wound that he received from Cato, they have to amputate a limb, and so he gets an artificial leg. Uh, after, well, let's face it, Peeta saves her life, she saves Peeta's life. Now, um, and then this is the other thing. One of the things of the growing Katniss. She doesn't really hate anybody, hasn't had cause to. She dislikes some people, she gets irritated at some people. She just, remember, doesn't really understand why Gale gets so upset and has to scream and stuff, because she figures, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It goes a long way to creating the revolutionary that we'll see. And there is an interesting thing at the end there that shows her that she maintains her humanity, despite the inhumane uh, actions, in the inhumanity of what goes on in the arena. When she eventually kills Cato, um, who's attacked by the mutts, with the eyes of all the people who have died. They talk about creepy. Um, um, Cato falls in with them, and she thinks, in his dying, he's asking her, please, please kill me, because he's ripped apart, but he has armor. That's what he got at the cornucopia when the survivors went to get things they needed. He needed armor uh, against Katniss's arrows, and she shoots him with an arrow in the head. Um, it says that she does it out of pity instead of vengeance. I think that's just a really important note there. And then, of course, you have the denouement. Um, when the two of them survive, and we have to pay attention to the consequences thereof. Uh, they pretend that they're so wildly in love that they do what they do, or they're willing to sacrifice themselves. And Haymitch, when Katniss survives the games and gives him a hug, he says, "Be careful, there's problems." And Cinna will repeat that Snow is mad. And these things carry over to when she'll get home. What's she going to do about Gale and their relationship, um, and the fact that Peeta actually really does love her, but she doesn't feel the same for him. All these things come together because her personal life and her relationship with these two boys is further complicated by the consequences of her actions, if you will, in the arena. And it all sets up book two. And so study well, read carefully. Um, I don't mind basically telling you things about what happens in the book, because what I want you to do, it's not just for spoiler effect. I want you, when you're reading, you can know these things, but to concentrate on their significance for the major conflicts, if you will, or themes that inform the trilogy. And you'll see, as I promised you, that this book is sophisticated literature. It's not just some funky surface adventure. It's sophisticated and mature narrative. One of the reasons that this book and others that you'll read are what we call crossover books that have attracted a serious-minded, mature audience. And as the gray hairs suggest. uh, I'm one of those adults who loves this kind of literature. Do a good job on the quiz.